Chapter 2, The Old Man in a Hut. Mayo, Calo. I used to like adventures, but I have to admit that there is only so much I could take. I could feel that, right now, my thirst for adventures has reached its peak, and I just crave a more peaceful life. Sadly, with Kino around, I doubt if the unwelcome adventures would ever cease. The more I thought about it, the more I became certain that things were bound to become more interesting, or dare I say, weirder. I scratched my armpit again. It had started to sting. Earlier, when the vines caught me between my arms, it tickled, and then the vines squeezed me tightly. However, upon release from my entanglement, I saw some raw red spots where the vines marked me. They itched like there was no tomorrow. What was that vine? I asked in frustration. What? Mayo's been scratching all over his side since he was released from the vines, Pyper said. I don't know what those vines were, but they sure were sturdy. Imagine, it carried Mayo's weight, Kino teased. Pyper chuckled too. I frowned. You always tease me about my weight. You're starting to sound like Lima. Both of them grew silent after that. I kicked at the stones in front of me, still pissed. Kino was eyeing me from the corner of his crazy eye. I'm sorry, he said. I promise not to tease you about your weight. I won't be like the other bullies. I fumed silently, but maybe there was nothing to be mad about. Kino already apologized. Where are we going now? Kino asked after a while. Pyper shrugged. I have no idea. But we've been traveling for days now. My guess is that we somehow managed to cross another province. Aren't we going to look for an inn at least? I want to sleep on a bed tonight. Anything would be better than a pile of dried leaves that Pyper calls cot. Those are definitely not cots, I said matter-of-factly. Pyper looked at me. Do you have any of your grandma's money with you? I shook my head and sighed. No, I drawled. Then we'll have to make do with our makeshift cots, Pyper said, almost admonishingly. Easy for her to say. She is so used to sleeping above the trees without a mattress. The first time I slept on her bed, I got sore all over the day after. Look. Kino said, pointing to a small hut. We might find some help there. Pyper's eyebrows met. Are you sure? I mean, 3 children roaming, traveling alone, isn't that going to raise any suspicion? Kino shook his head. Maybe, maybe not. Nobody looks dangerous enough among us. Come on, Pyper, use your charm. Smile at whoever lives there, he said before pausing. Though I'm not sure if it will work because you have gray skin. Pyper frowned, so I gave her a nudge. Don't worry. Maybe gray is still on the spectrum of adorable. Still, she trotted lightly and yet was knocking on the door a few seconds later. Kino and I walked towards her, stopping a few yards away from the door and deciding to sit on the ground. After a while, the door opened. A balding man peered through the gap. Pyper gave him her sweetest smile. We could barely hear what they were talking about, but it seemed like Pyper did charm the old man. Pyper glanced back at us and motioned us to come over. We obliged quickly before the man changed his mind. I hope he has some good food, I murmured. I thought you just wanted a bed, Kino said. I don't think his bed is going to be soft. Look at the size of his hut, I said. I wasn't being mean but rather merely pointing out the obvious. Kino frowned at me. He was sensitive when it came to things like that. You should be grateful that this man is willing to take us in, he whispered. I followed my friends inside. The balding man was toothless too. I felt a subtle chill at the back of my neck when I saw his face. It was covered with wrinkles, which was definitely not a pleasant sight. But when he asked us to join him at the dinner table, a barrel with a plank of wood set atop it, I stopped paying attention to how he looked. There was lentil soup, and although the old man gave us only a ladleful, the sight of food was enough to make my stomach growl. I sat between Pyper and Kino and found myself directly in front of the old man. The sight of his toothless mouth and the loud slurping sounds he made surprisingly did not bother me at all. I was so hungry, craving real food the entire week. Nothing could ever make me lose my appetite at this point. I glanced at Kino and saw that he had finished his bowl of soup. Pyper was also done eating her meal. We must have behaved like famished vagrants. The old man was watching us, his eyes crinkling on the sides. "So you're orphans, huh?" the man asked. Pyper blushed. She nodded. "Master, we wish not to speak about our parents," she said. The old man laughed. "Are you really going to stick to your story?" Kino twisted in his seat, his eyes rounding. I caught his eyes, and he seemed to be confused too. Pyper, though, was red all over her face. I never thought that with her gray skin, she could turn into a different shade. What exactly did Pyper tell the man? "You are a terrible liar," the old man said, chuckling. "These two don't look alike at all," he said, shaking his head. "And you tell me they are twins." I swallowed, and sweat started to form on my forehead. The old man shook his head, eyeing us kindly. "Now, what's your story?" "The real one?" he asked. Pyper glanced at us. We were short for words. If I opened my mouth, I knew that I would probably bring more trouble to us. "Pardon us, master. But we are traveling away from Canela," Kino said. "Oh. Did he really have to tell the truth? Kino is really so dumb. Or honest. Or I don't know. Right now, he deserved to be kicked in the shin, so I did." "Ouch!" Kino yelled. I grinned. "Oops," I said through gritted teeth. "Come on," the man said. "Tell me about it before I serve the roasted chicken," he said. My mouth watered. Roasted chicken? Raw chicken would do. I licked my lips in anticipation. "We ran away from Canela to escape the Emperor," I said in a rush. "Mayo!" Pyper yelled. I looked at her. "What? If I didn't say it, you or Kino would. What difference would it make if it came from me?" Kino looked worried. Pyper paled. And I could not for the life of me figure out what I had done wrong. The old man laughed and stood up before bending over to take the chicken from the stove's roaring fire. The chicken did look juicy. The old man put it down on the table and tore off a leg. He started eating. "Help yourself," he said. I stood up and grabbed the other leg and sank my teeth into it. Pyper and Kino took the breast part, and soon enough, all our hands were covered with grease. But it was delicious grease. "Now that you're full, would you mind telling me your story? And this time, I don't want to hear any more lies," the old man said. Pyper glanced at Kino and me. Then she opened her mouth and told the old man everything. The following morning, we all got up early. I tugged at the coat the man handed me the night before. It was too long and reached up to my knees, but the width fit me snugly, as though it was tailored just for me. I might have grown fatter still, which was hard to believe because all we ever did was walk these past few days. "Can't we stay for a while? When we start on the road again, there's no telling when we could have another decent meal," I said, almost whiny. Kino shook his head sternly. "No. We dallied long enough. We need to make up for the lost time," he said. I grunted. My feet were still sore from all the walking. Pyper was the last to bid goodbye to the old man. She hugged him tightly, and I could tell that she was sincere about the embrace because the old man's eyes looked moist when he wished Pyper a safe voyage. Pyper nodded and waved goodbye again. As we walked out of the door, the sky was as still and as dark as the road ahead of us. "Take this," the old man said as he trailed from behind us, following us along the path. He was holding the reins of a chocolate-colored bay with a white spot right between its eyes. "No, Master Liso. We can't accept that," Kino said. "You have given us more than enough." The old man chuckled. "I don't need a horse. I stay inside the hut on most days." "Well, except when there's no more food," he said kindly. "Here, take Brownie with you." Pyper looked abashed, but her eyes watered, And she jumped towards the old man. Then she enclosed him in another of her tight embraces and kissed him while she was on tiptoes. "Thank you, Master Liso. We are, very grateful," she said. Kino was beaming too. I could see in his eyes that he was also more than grateful. "Thank you, Master Liso," I said, bowing towards him. "My sword is yours," I said. The old man chuckled. "Sword?" I blushed. "When I become a soldier, I will have one," I said defensively. "And when that time comes, I will honor my promise to you." The old man's eyes glinted with amusement. He put a hand over my limp hair and said, "Then so be one. To all of us," he added, "may the twin moons keep you safe." We all muttered thanks. Then Kino climbed onto the horse and pulled me up. Pyper scrambled to climb up and sat in front of Kino. "Goodbye, Master Liso," we said in unison. He waved his hand at us as we rode onward. When I looked back, a few paces away from Master Liso, I saw him pull a paper from his belt pouch. Then he wrote something on the paper, rolled it, and whistled. A bird flew towards him. He tucked the paper to the bird's leg and released it. "I think Master Liso is our enemy," I whispered to Kino. "Quit it, Mayo," Kino said. "No, I'm serious. He wrote something and sent the letter through a bird," I argued. Kino's back tensed. Then, all the more reason to keep quiet. "We can't let him know that we know," he said. "At the count of 3, let's all look back, wave one last time, and then ride like the wind." I nodded. Kino counted, 1, 2, 3. We all looked back and waved. Then Kino kicked at the horse, sending me almost falling to the ground. I gripped his waist tightly and prayed that Master Liso was not an enemy. Dear gods, no. I could not be held captive.